Hello everyone, can you hear me well? Great. So welcome to this panel discussion called Towards Better Information Management Collaboration in Practice. So this roundtable is framed as part of one of the axes of topics we defined for this year's GeOnG, which is improving and working on collaboration between humanitarian and development organizations, and in particular with a component of collaborating with field actors and field communities. So we try to assemble a panel of actors with different backgrounds. So we have Rivin, who is a member of OpenStreetMap community, so Western Bangladesh. I'll let them introduce more in detail after. Emmanuel, who is member of GLO, based in Ireland, right? Exactly. And Shazman from the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and I don't know where you're based actually.
In Montreal.
In Canada, okay. And I'm Martin from CartONG. I will be the facilitator of this roundtable. So we have a short presentation from Shaz, and the other two panelists decided more to have just an open discussion. So we will start with your presentation. I will then give the floor to you guys if you want to also do a quick introduction of who you are, what you do, so people know how to frame their questions. And afterward, I have like suggestion of question on my side, but it will also be open to the room. The idea is really to have an open discussion. So let's start with Shaz, if you want. So Shaz, you're a global project manager at HUT, and the question I asked you when preparing the session was to give us an example of successful collaboration between like different levels of stakeholders. Speaking of data, of course, everything we will be discussing is around mapping, data, and information management. We're not talking about general coordination of the humanitarian sector, since that would be too much. But you'll see that, I think, through the example that we'll be presenting at the discussion, you'll see that data is often a catalyst for collaboration, which is also something we encourage. So, here to you, Shaz.
Thank you. Hi everyone, very nice to see you all and meet you all for this conference. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Okay. So today I wanted to quickly share the methodology of participatory mapping that we use at HUT in order to enable collaboration within the different stakeholders. So what is participatory mapping? So I put here a little bit of like the definition that we use, but the most important point that I wanted to share with you was that the community map their own space with their own understanding of that space. So it's not just the features that we map, but it's also like the understanding of how the space is evolving with the community. When we talk about the participatory mapping, there's actually a process that is used. So the planning process, where we understand the different contextual factors, and so in which different stakeholders come already into place in order to start understanding the context. So it can be like either around security, it can be around the problematic, etc. Then the preparation phase. So that's understanding a little bit more the actual questions and the objectives that you have in mapping. And it's also quite important, that preparation phase, because it's really about sustaining the interest of the local communities with which you're working. Because without that preparation phase of really like making the community understand what is mapping, what data represent, and walking them through their own understanding of the space, then the data from the participatory mapping is not going to be as relevant. And finally, the execution phase, so the data collection, but as well one of the most important, in my opinion, the usage phase. So we don't want just the data to be collected and that's it, but how will the community actually take ownership of the data that they have mapped, and how will they use it, and walking them through that most impactful process of using the data. I believe personally that this process is extremely important, especially in understanding the do-no-harm principle and more generally protection principles, because as external, we don't understand what the different elements in the community actually means. And so when the community is the one that map their own space, they do understand whether there is a need or not to map some features. And I believe that you'll see a little bit more within the next slides of the presentation, as well as, I guess, in the next few days. All right. So this very simple slide actually represent kind of like the different stakeholders with which we usually work. And this morning, actually, during the plenary session, I really enjoyed someone said something about upward and downward accountability. So this slide really is representing more the downward accountability rather than the upward, which is a whole other process, like more with the donors, etc. But this one is accountability that we have towards the community, towards the user of the data. How we usually work is that we really put the local communities at the center as the most important stakeholder and the strongest stakeholder in the collaboration. And OSM communities, because we work with OSM communities, are accompanying the local communities with the applied technical knowledge that they have, as well as their understanding of the local knowledge as well. I as well put the local governments and national governments in here because, well, they also are crucial, and it is crucial that they understand the specific objective of the project and what they can get out of it, because in the end, more often than not, they are the ones who are going to be endorsing and funding maybe more projects, and as well as using to some extent the data that will be collected. As part of the NGO part, more often than not, they also have they need to have a very good understanding of the project, what it is and what it is not. And we, through the participatory mapping process, that allows them to also give input on how they will then be using the data. I want to add here as well that it's very important, the importance, just want to emphasize the importance of really putting the local communities at the center of this collaboration with the different stakeholders, because it's part actually of like a resilient strategy. So if the project stays very localized and siloed within one or the other of the stakeholders, then there will, most of the time, it will also have an end in time. What we've seen is that if we really put the community at the center of the project, then it kind of has a snowball effect, which allows to then have more community-based initiative rolling out of that. Another point that I wanted to bring forward is that when you look at all those different stakeholders, the agendas are not always aligning. Everyone wants something out of a project like that, and sometimes those are quite different. So in the planning phase of the participatory mapping, it's very important to balance the different agendas and motivations of each stakeholder so that they still have the incentive to participate and to be present during the project, but while not putting one stakeholder's agenda above the community's agenda. Am I good on time? Okay. All right. Okay. As to exemplify what I meant by participatory mapping, I just wanted to present you one of the projects that we've done in DRC called Scaling Missing Maps. So this project was from 2019 to 2021 in response to the Ebola outbreak in 2019. It was for being able to do more easily patient tracing. So the idea was locating and mapping geographical handling features within a district, so to allow community health workers to locate and trace patients. So instead of going straight into data collection and straight into like, okay, how do we do this and that, etc., we really took the time to first understand the work of community health workers. So that was a very long phase of the planning and the design, was to just like stay with community health workers and like see what is their work, what do they do, how they use data in their everyday life and everyday task, and then only start looking at their needs. And through doing that, there was also a type of soft training on data literacy and mapping literacy, so that we would not ask them to just like tell us what do you need us to map, but they would understand more in depth what mapping could represent, so that the mapping was done in a way that it could easily be integrated into their workflow. And then only we designed the data collection and started the data collection. So through that process, we really involved as well government and as well through the soft training on open mapping and data literacy. Once again, so that the different governments would understand that it's not just gathering data for intel, spying, etc., but really there was a purpose behind. Especially in some areas of DRC where we were working in North Kivu, it's quite a place with a lot of insecurity, so that allowed to actually create different levels of trust with the different communities and the government, so that we could have more easily access. To finish up, I just wanted to show you one of the maps that resulted from that data collection. And one of the things that was very nice in the project was that through being able to, with that original objective of doing patient tracing, we actually, the community health workers were able to define that map was used for 1,000 other things, and for example, vaccination campaigns, early childhood care, all of that. And so the maps were actually designed then in the restitution of the data. The maps were actually designed so that they could use it not only for one purpose, but for all of those purposes. Yeah, that's it on my side. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jess. We love the opportunity to get back to what you just said anyway. What I suggest for now, and forgive me because I forgot to mention, actually we were supposed to have 4 panelists on this panel with Eric from World Vision, who was supposed to join us remotely. But he's deployed in Ukraine currently and had a field emergency this morning, so he will not be able to make it with us today, unfortunately. The idea was to have a balance a bit between the more like open data, OpenStreetMap ecosystem and more like traditional NGOs, if I can say. But nevertheless, we have Emmanuel that will be doing this part. But before we get to this, I suggest we continue with Rivin, because there is a link with what Shaz was just discussing. So Rivin, you're from both your members of the OpenStreetMap Bangladesh community and also part of an organization called Bangladesh Open Initiative Lab. So what I suggest is, because I think probably some of our panelists don't have a knowledge of how OSM community is functioning, what it's doing, what is its goal, what is its strategy in a way. I think just presenting a bit your activities, like not focusing on the technical aspects, but more like on the organizational aspect and your vision and this kind of stuff. So the floor is open, and I leave you to say what you want, and we'll dig in the questions. Thanks.
Yeah,
I think the mic is not, yeah, it's for the recording.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Tasawuf, also known as Rivin. There is a confusion. Some people know me as Rivin, some people know me as Tasawuf. This has been a confusion all the time.
Can you take the mic and show us? Is it better with the mic? Or?
Is it better with the mic? Or?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I was confused. I'm from Bangladesh, as Martin mentioned. I have been a part of OpenStreetMap Bangladesh community since 2014 or so, and currently I'm also the executive director for Bangladesh Open Innovation Lab. This is an organizational initiative that derived from OpenStreetMap Bangladesh community itself, actually. So let me just get back a bit. Why, as I was mentioning, that Bangladesh Open Innovation Lab is derived from OpenStreetMap Bangladesh community. This is more like OSM in Bangladesh has been there since 2011 or so. So there have been multiple initiatives that have been taken to somehow creating the buzz in the community and stuff like that. From 2013, we have seen NGOs and aid agencies have been somehow working with some capacity development trainings and stuff with OSM and things. Later on in 2015, Missing Maps actually initiated a pilot project in Dhaka when we have seen initiatives like students, university students, getting engaged with the OSM movement in the process. A lot of volunteers we were having from the educational institute, students were chipping in. But there has been a challenge in the process, because as there are a lot of small groups, those are being somehow working together to contribute in OpenStreetMap and creating the base map for Bangladesh over there, and supporting the global causes like the humanitarian mapping, the activations from Missing Maps and HOT itself. So at that time we experienced that there is a lack of structured community coordination over there, and at the same time we are finding it difficult to bring the best from the diverse community volunteers out there and sustaining them, actually, because there has been challenge all the way through from the very beginning to sustain the volunteers, especially in countries like Bangladesh out there. So first of all, the concept of volunteerism is a bit different from what we have seen in Europe or in Americas and in Bangladesh. So this is where we were finding the challenges, and at the same time to create organized support and collaboration with government agencies or other stakeholders out there. It was challenging with no organizational entities out there. So this is where, to resolve this challenge, we initiated initially a core team out there who will be supporting the humanitarian part of humanitarian support for all the activations from hot missing maps and other NGOs out there. We were calling it the team group. That was Bangladesh Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Operation team. And later on from that team, we decided to go towards more organized authorization and affiliated with the actually more in a for-profit and non-profit blending concept actually. The Bangladesh Open Innovation Lab BOIL comes into play. So why we were also thinking about the for-profit work? Because most of the volunteers were coming from actually they were university students. They are very enthusiastic about how they can contribute more. But at the long run, when they're finding it they were finding it difficult to somehow connect their later professional goals and also career goals with the volunteerism they are engaged in. So to create some sort of stepping stone and somewhat create what do you say? It was more like giving them the opportunity to become financially and career centric volunteerism. It's more like that. We initiated that Bangladesh Open Innovation Lab as an organization. So, as it was mentioned earlier, that OSM itself it has a unique characteristics in terms of collaboration. You will find it that OSM is somewhat connected to free and open source softwares, that's FOSS, ICT for development, and at the same time data for development. Sometimes it is connected to, obviously it is connected to open data and geographical information system itself. So there are ample lot of opportunities we can connect to if we think about how OpenStreetMap volunteers somehow can get into the mainstream sections. So this is where we try to actually take the initiatives to have our own projects and have these volunteers getting something, not just only they're doing it for fun, but they are also doing it as a part of their career development too. So at the very beginning, what we started with, we started initially collaborating with one of the startups out there. That time we started supporting their map initiatives. They were having their own map. We have to support their own map needs. But during the process, we had a different sort of contract with them. We put some additional clause that the people who will be part of that team, support team, they will also have some sort of autonomy that they can support the global and local local humanitarian mapping needs in the process, and they will have they can do it with using the facilities the startup is providing for that team. So this is where we started nurturing specific 40 to 45 or volunteers were picked from the whole community, who were nurtured in a more let's say close observation and somewhat with all the trainings and capacity development things were happening in the process. So all of a sudden in between 2017 to 2020 actually, just before pandemic, we had a very strong group of volunteers who were supporting not only the mapping, global humanitarian mapping, but also they were supporting as validators, they were supporting as trainers. All these initiatives were being supported by that specific team. So meanwhile, we started to collaborate more and more with other organizations too, with local NGOs, even some with some UN bodies like UNICEF and some other organizations and WFP. And at the same time, we started supporting NGOs like Save the Children International, WaterAid, so all in specific projects actually. So all these things were possible just because we had an entity out there who can actually talk on behalf of the community itself. So this is more like we were saying that this is sort of you can say this is collaboration for sustainability. This is one of the things we were focusing on. This is how we were working, and till now we have been in collaboration with multiple NGOs, startups, tech firms, and at the same time we have supported at least more than 10 to 15 research initiatives by different universities, even not only in Bangladesh but also from outside Bangladesh. Even we have supported Stanford, Oxford University research team, even some from Harvard Institute of Geosciences. So different level of collaboration is happening down there, and at the same time we are working closely to advocating open data, open source technologies to even to the government level with different government organizations in the process. And we are constantly in close collaboration with HOT and other initiatives that has been taken, especially based on open source technologies and open geospatial and non-geospatial data. This is how things are going right now. Though during the pandemic, things are being a bit rattled up because we have missed some very good opportunities actually of scaling things up. Right now we are facing some challenges, but still things are going in the direction where things are going to change, and we are trying to get back to the actual to the same phase we were being just before the pandemic. This is how things are there right now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So yeah, just for an introduction, I think I already have lots of questions. That was really good. I felt like your background would be already a good starting point. So I'm going to leave the floor to Emmanuel for the final presentation, and then we'll have almost 1 hour for exchanges with the room, so you can ask plenty of questions. So Emmanuel, I'll pass you by the keyboard for the presentation. So yeah, while you're plugging in, so as I was saying before, we try to have a mixed panel of like the more, I would say like, not ground organization, because of course codes fieldwork, but more like organization around the OpenStreetMap ecosystem and like the OSM communities. And we also wanted to mix that with some organizations are doing, lots of organizations are doing participatory and collaboration and cross-level collaboration without doing OpenStreetMap, obviously. So we wanted to have a bit also this vision with Emmanuel. Is it working? Yeah, perfect. So you can take this mic and we are listening to you.
Thank you. I'm Emmanuel Adekola. I'm with Goal. And talking about collaboration, we have been working with other partners in Northwest Syria just to be able to address what I would actually term as a common challenge. Right, so we have so many implementation basically in Syria, as you all can imagine, and we have persons basically providing similar programs. So, and we have actually been doing this as well. So, but then the question of reaching as many persons as possible comes up. Right, and then I think the major question of how do we actually, manage double dipping input as far as our programs are actually concerned, and being able to ensure that the scarce resources that we actually have within the international development sector is properly, appropriated to persons who are in dire need of these programs. Just to perhaps maybe as a means of a little into what we do, right? In Syria precisely, we are actually currently in about 14 countries, but in Syria, right, we have programs actually spanning different sectors, right, in an integrated manner, right, providing food security, right, multi-purpose cash assistance, or what some persons will call cash voucher assistance, right? WASH, emergency response, nutrition, right? Shelter, and livelihood. So we are basically targeting all the sector to actually improve, the standard of living, to actually also ensure that persons who are actually worst affected are actually getting the level of help that they actually need, right? So as you can imagine, this actually comes, like I said earlier, with a number of challenges. How do you actually account, right, for different persons, perhaps coming into the program at different points, right? And then at the same time, ensuring that at least everybody actually gets a fair share, right, of what the programs are actually offering. So, like I said, the major question, right, was how do we manage WDP to better programs in reaching more beneficiaries? And then we started talking across, multiple, stakeholders or partners, as we put it, in terms of there's a need for collaboration. And I know that we've had so many discussions, right, and I think some are very, very fundamental and actually different in different areas, especially things around maybe identity management, right? I've heard colleagues talk about implementation in Ukraine, right? And I was like, oh, that's good. Ukraine, as far as I'm concerned, at least somewhat a good identity management system in place, right? Things can be better managed. So, but what happens when you are actually in, war-torn countries, right? Where perhaps the government doesn't actually have some certain infrastructures in place, right, to be able to even set up a proper identity management system, right, for you to be able to say, okay, now we have a reliable system in place for us to be able to go ahead and identify, our beneficiaries, and at the same time, prevent perhaps double dipping, and at the same time reaching as many persons as possible with hate, right? So so these were some of the part of the considerations, and we came together in Northwest Syria, right, with about 7 other partners, right, and then we started discussing the possibility of actually having some form of collaboration around interoperability of our systems. That is, to be very, very precise, beneficiary identification, right? And then for us to be able to have perhaps another layer, what I'll call a federation, right? At the top of all the implementing partners. So we have perhaps a database that we can all feed into, right? And then be able to do some beneficiary identification and see who is actually uptaking what service, right, from time to time. And that way, that can actually, give us a sense of are we actually reaching everybody, or we are actually reaching the same set of persons, while some other persons are actually worse off, because of how we've actually implemented teams. So these are, part of the discussions we are currently having, and then we actually, decided to have a form of assessment, right, in terms of what will it take to actually have these integrations, this interoperability, looking at the differences within our systems, right? I mean, we all know, like, arguably we have almost the same kind of data flow. I mean, in terms of identifying beneficiaries, in terms of registering beneficiaries, in terms of providing interventions from time to time, and then right, basically following up. So we have almost similar data flow, I mean, across different organizations. So, but then I know we might actually differ in terms of the platforms we are actually using. So, but be that as it may, there are opportunities, right, for us to start having that conversation around how do we then, have a centralized platform for us to be able to identify beneficiaries, for us to be able to, reach as many persons as possible. So this is, part of the things we working on, and I think there has been, several conversations, right, within organizations, and I know even at a higher level, because then you start asking some interesting questions around who actually should, start these conversations, who should actually lead this conversation, and you have many vested interests, right? You have donor differences, right? You have quite a number of others to actually, skip, basically, for you to be able to achieve that, right? Also, right, you also want to start thinking about issues around data protection, right? So many things to actually, put into consideration as you are actually going along that cascade of, okay, this is a good thing to do, right? Then what are the possible issues that can actually arise, right, from actually trying to, bridge the gap and getting things moving. Okay, I don't know. I know we're going to still have some more time for further interactions. So just to also mention that in actually accessing, or assessing what needs to be done, right? We went through the OCHA standards, right? Looking at each point from accessibility, right, to timeliness, to reliability, right? And then trying to do a form of what is actually happening within this organization. And I think going into this has actually reviewed, right, what possibly the challenges could be if we want to start talking about having federated systems, right? It's actually, interesting because then you see from a closer angle how different issues, right, can actually come up. But we are committed, right, to actually making things work, and then to actually ensure that we are able to actually, manage our different expectations sometimes, right, and then try to actually bring things right together, because then we can start talking about modeling the same to other maybe consortium or other organizations, right, that actually wants to achieve the same. Another thing to mention here is it's always good, and I think I will talk more about that too in a bit, to try as much as possible to find, how I put it now, a unifying objective, right? A unifying champion, or perhaps a key stakeholder, right? Who can actually moderate these discussions, right? To a great extent. And then be able to kind of put everyone in check, right? Which is what Goal sort of, right? Although I know in some other contexts, maybe not the ideal, right? But Goal is actually doing right now in North Syria in terms of coordinating these discussions among these multiple partners. Okay.
Thanks, Emmanuel. It's a good introduction. Can you just give me back the cable? Okay, so wait, I let you start thinking about questions you would like to ask for panel. I will start with the first one. So it can be like either all of you answer or just one as you want. My question is pretty simple. It's quite open. It's like if you could basically have one thing change in the way our humanitarian development ecosystem is working. So it could be, for instance, like a new platform that doesn't exist, or a change of the position of the donors, or a change of position of like NGOs in their environment. If you could change one thing to improve collaboration around data and eventually impact, from your experience and your perspective, what would that be? It's a big question. I don't know if someone wants to start.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
In a very concise way, I would like to say, I would like to see the change of mindset within the people who are taking decisions, who are somehow actually planning. If you talk about the humanitarian or aid agencies, NGOs, or even in the governance, it's more or less like the people's mindset need to be changed. Otherwise, it is hard. Because what we have seen, the major challenge, especially I'm sharing this experience based on what's happening back in Bangladesh. It's more or less like if they are not opening their mind towards these open data, open technologies, and actually when we're talking about ICT for development or ICT for social goods, or even data for development or data for social goods, these will remain more as just some fluffy words, nothing else, if they don't change their minds in the process. And at the same time, another thing is not only changing their minds, they need to somehow they need to get educated, some sort of not awareness build up. I would rather say their capacity also needs to be increased in terms of taking these new things and opening themselves to new opportunities of collaborations and stuff like that. Because most of the cases, what happens with this sort of I would say movement, when things are going on, people has a tendency, like as I said, when it came out that you can have innovation is one of the major pillars you should have in your program planning things. People started putting that innovation in their plannings and concept notes, just copying what others have listed out there, not even knowing what it means. So they have to realize what changes it might actually make happen if this innovation or openness in data technologies and these sort of things might create. So this is one of the things I thought that it should. If I'm giving the power, I would have tried to do that, but it's hard to do. Yeah.
Thanks, Ruben. It's quite interesting. I think like what you are mentioning, this need for a change a bit of paradigm for the decision makers. It's something that we find at all levels, I think, in the humanitarian system. So we see here through the lens of data, but it's something that is the same in any sector, I think. CartONG and Hot also, by the way, are members of a network called the H2H, so Humanitarian to Humanitarian. It's a network of support organization. And one of our main goals, collective goal as advocacy, is really this aspect to I will not say educate because it sounds a bit like a cocky, but like raise awareness, I would say, among decision makers. And this is everywhere. Like it can be local or national governments in a country, but it's also like the top level decision makers in the UN or in big NGOs. And it's normal. It's people that are like less connected to the day-to-day work. And yeah, showing them the benefit of actual collaboration, I think, can go a long way. But often the actors that are doing this actual collaboration, like you, lack of the connection to do so. So it's also one of our goals, and I hope GeONG in a very, very small part will support. I don't know if one of you want to answer the question too. If you have time to think through, Emmanuel, Shaz.
Do you want to repeat the question one more time? Do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it was just like, if you can, like, if you had a wish to grant, if you could change one thing, like in the humanitarian ecosystem, in your environment as a humanitarian organization, to make easier collaboration, like the one you described, what would that be?
Yeah. So I would say flexibility and perhaps openness. A good number of times, right, we are all sort of working almost towards the same goal. Like we have the same purpose of some sort, right? We are trying to reach persons, right, in their needs. And how we do that actually is very, very maybe different sometimes, right, in terms of perhaps the systems we put in place, the processes we put in place, and all that. And we sometimes do insist on, this is how we want it, right? And that's how it should be, right? So, but if we can actually, have some form of openness to, seeing through other people's lenses, I'll put it that way, in terms of how they are actually doing things, then we might actually be getting closer to having a collaboration, right, on the increase. Being flexible enough to say, okay, you have this solution, does it work, right? And it works, right? And then being perhaps sometimes a big organization, right, to be able to say, I'm actually open to that. Let's take a look at it. So, but sometimes, even though we're actually all trying to achieve the same aim, a good number of times, we actually, want or perhaps have some vested interest, right? Organization. I'm talking about, even at the donor level, right? Sometimes you have this kind of code or silent competition going on, right? Or a code war of some sort, right? And then perhaps also different agendas also being pushed, and even sometimes even down to maybe different products, in quote, right? Also being pushed, right? Depending on which organization you're talking to, some persons will say, oh, I like this software, or perhaps I'm using this particular tool for different reasons, right? And then you talk to them, oh, I like this and all that. So, but we need to actually, get to the point where we actually look beyond this, all right, differences, and think about the people we're trying to serve, right? And then just also think about we are all trying to, in quote, right, achieve the same thing. Yes, there are different maybe methods or different processes, different tools, different systems that can be put in place to actually achieve this. But at the end of the day, is it smarter, right, for all to actually, come together and adopt maybe something similar or something that is exactly the same, just to be able to, improve our programs. So for me, I would actually say yes, more flexibility around that, right? Openness, right, to ideas coming from others or perhaps might not be from our system, right? To just be able to get to that point where we can actually say, yes, we've really served different communities that we have actually found ourselves in, and then they're actually better off for it. Yep.
Thanks, Emmanuel. I think that's something very interesting you say, that it's something also that is not specific to data, but I think local people complain to local NGOs complain to international NGOs, internationals complain to donors, and it's a pyramid like this. And at some point, it's difficult to kind of stop this mechanism, I think, because it's like lots of interlinked interests, etc. So I think with data and open data in particular, but not only, we have a possibility to break a bit these chains of not understanding each other, etc. Because you have tools that are open by design in a way, and so I think it's an interesting thing to dig on. I will let Shaz answer also my question if you feel like it.
Hey. Well, actually, to jump a little bit on what you both just said. I was trying to think and frame exactly what I wanted to say, and it was more around the balance in power, basically that either the donors or the international NGOs or those UN agencies have over local communities, and how to actually bring the voice of local communities or local NGOs into the game, into the decision making, etc. I don't know about the solution, but actually thinking about what you just said, Martin, and as well Emmanuel, like that open data might be actually a way in which that balance can actually be shifted a little bit, because of its accessibility. And I just wanted to there was one thing that kept in my mind as well, was that when we're talking, so you said very precisely in the humanitarian sector, as HUT will work more around, kind of at the frontier between humanitarian and development sector, because the humanitarian sector, ongoing conflict, etc., has a very specific way of working, and data has a very specific position within it. So in planning, in funding, and in what you mentioned around beneficiaries and monitoring, but in the development sector, it has a completely different role. I'm actually, as I speak, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling, I'm starting to wonder if open data can have that role of bringing communities, local communities, back in the table, in the balance of the table within the humanitarian sector, due to all the security and protection issues around that. Maybe more like looking more at the development side. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Shaz. So I know it's a post-lunch session, so like everybody's kind of starting to fall asleep, and like we've been talking a long time, but now is the time for your questions and intervention. So I think Luc will help us with the mic. So je te passe le micro. We have someone in the back. Yeah.
Just a short intervention about your project in, for example, in GRC. It's just to get better information at the sources, at the community level. For example, in North Kivu, Chambéry, for example. But my intervention is, I was there, so wanted to get better information from local community. It was difficult in a city, everywhere around the world, to find a community. You can find individuals who play already a role inside the community that you try to reinforce, but you cannot empower a local community. You need to find an individual, otherwise it's difficult to. And when you find these individuals, then you can, and this is what we try, we have, with your project, in fact, we start, and the way that I found, perhaps not my way, is to give them the power to write their own project for data collection for health center, for example, the project that you show. And they need to write the procedure, and to sell it to humanitarian NGO, MSF, WHO, and I give them these words. And I say, you have a power, you know better than me the community because you already has been there, and then that's the sources. I say, you are the best expert. I try to exchange, so my question will come after. Don't worry, I start to be short and clear. And then after, you have OpenStreetMap RDC, you have OT, you have MSF, and each steps you have interpretation. What the community needs, and just to say, how we can empower community, local community, in our area when you employ them, in our area where you don't have a lot of employment. What is the basis? How we can reduce this biases, all the biases that you create from the donors and they sell it to CDC at the end, and they get the project through OpenStreetMap and blah blah blah. But anyway, it's their project, and they have seen step by step the difficulties, the OpenStreetMap community difficulties inside the community, inside their own communities, because they took the roles as a project manager. You can imagine, first time. So they changed the relation between university, their own groups. And remember, in a city, you don't have a community. You have people coming in and out. You know, it's a city. It's not a village. Okay, I stop there. How we can reduce this gap? Yes. End of.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I just want to make sure I understood well the question. It's the bias between the part where we collect the data and then the users of the data, right? So first was that the users of the data were the data collectors in that project. In the sense that it was the community health workers themselves who went and collected the data, and then with the accompaniment of OSM DRC, and reviewed the data, validated the data, and finally, like OSM DRC was able to create maps, but that also were reviewed on many accounts. So OSM was really more of a technical support to accompany throughout the process, but a very a process in which the users knew exactly what data was going to be collected, and how by doing so, how that data could actually be used into their own work. And so in that case, actually, like the donor who was GCC, Grand Challenge Canada, was more interested around the methodology of scaling data collection rather than the actual data itself. So the data, so we didn't have that pressure of like having to give back a set of data sets that could be interpreted in X or Y. That project was a proof of concept of a methodology, basically. So I think that actually made quite a bit of difference as well in the way that the project was managed. And similar to actually what you mentioned, and what within HOT, like we're trying more and more to apply is really to have a member of the OSM communities, members of the OSM community, to really be the project managers of the project, and while accompanying them into like the different processes of project management, etc. Because well, that's not everyone who has that background. So yeah, I don't know if I answer your question.
No, completely, and it's true that I remember. Yeah, I realize now that it's true that with open data and OpenStreetMap, we were free, in fact, to create projects locally, because the data can go back to anyone, and that's protect us when you are in the field. Mm-hmm. Because no, it's open for all the people can participate.
Mm-hmm. If I can just add one thing is that in that case as well, it was actually around Beni Butembo. The fact that we really took the time of like working with those different levels of government allowed the data to actually be accepted on OSM and allow a protection of the people who are giving us the data, because it's like a type of high risk area, and having to actually negotiate some data access with rebels with the GPS in hand is not ideal. So that whole process actually really made a big difference in the acceptance of the data by all parties.
I think this exchange is interesting. Like actually, the three of us or three organizations have worked on this aspect of health data collection in DRC with OSM, and I think all with different angles and approaches. And to me, it's more like complementary. I wouldn't say it's the competition, because like as long as you are like keeping in mind this aspect of feeding back to the local groups, and so I will pass by the mic to Ribin again, because in this kind of situation, you are the central actor. Like you are the one that can provide like long-term vision and sustainability, and international actors like us come, and like we need something, we ask it to you, but you're the one like making sure that there is like consistency and sustainable development of the data.
Thank you. Actually, I'm just going back to the question itself first. There are two different things over here. One is project that is being over here. There is an example out there. Specific projects where volunteers are being engaged in and done beautiful work over there. And another thing is empowerment. So empowerment project, actually, from my experience, I would say project doesn't empower the community itself. Empowerment comes if that specific, I would say, activity that community or people, if it is individual, it can be individual, is working on, if they feel ownership of that. So the question remains, in a project, the data over there, actually, is it like the community over there or the individuals who were working over there, are they feel like they're the owner of the data? This is the question that comes in. If we can make it possible that the community and the individuals who are actively volunteering or contributing to this specific open data, OpenStreetMap, or anything over there, they have to feel that they are the owner. So where it comes is when these sort of projects are happening, this is more like going from up to the downstream. The projects plannings and other things are happening with the donor, with HOT and other organizations, but the community is more engaged in implementation. So implementers are not the owners. They have to find themselves as the owners. So they have to be part of this planning too. They need to also be part of that planning. So this is where we are saying that the example I was giving, what we have done in Bangladesh. Actually, we are not relying on HOT or other organizations for project developments or plannings and other things. What we are asking from other organizations is more like technical support, capacity development, and other things. So even if it is possible in some cases, as I said, in some cases people are looking for experienced organizations or far long experience in this sort of things that has been done by organizations and other people out there. So in those cases might be consortiums and other things can come into play. But the problem remains over there is we are constantly talking about projects being empowering the communities. I'm not sure, I might differ in this aspect that it is not empowering. I have seen a lot of volunteers, individuals who has been constantly working in OpenStreetMap, even in the humanitarian contribution. If you go through the overall contribution stats, probably right now he's second or third best contributor in that list. He's an individual. He doesn't really get connected to any projects or any organizations out there. He's just doing it for himself, and whenever he's doing it, he focuses on the quality, he focuses on the things, very basics, and he deep dives into the whole thing actually. So projects, whenever the projects are happening, we are finding it difficult. The projects are gone, volunteers are gone. So when we are saying that sustainability has been an issue in most of the part of even OpenStreetMap ecosystem, this is what's happening. New projects coming in, new volunteers are chipping in. The old ones are not sustaining. Why not? So we have to find that one first. As you were mentioning, that you have to first empower the individuals, empower the community to find out what are the needs. Then they can propose it back to somewhere that, okay, this can be done. So in the planning process, if it is somehow, as it was also mentioned that not all the capacity, we cannot find all the capacities in the community all the time. It is also a very big challenge out there. But this is where we have to work on to bring those capacities down there. For example, in Bangladesh community, we have some couple of very good tech guys out there. Two of them are also individually supporting OSM Docker build out there in the OSM tech stack. But the problem remains that they do not get that sort of support in terms of capacity development or things like that. So these sort of things that is happening behind the curtains are not being shown in whatever showcasing has been done with OSM communities, even all the humanitarian mapping and all those stuff. So what we have found out that we have to somehow think out of the box, like we need to focus more on quality rather than the number game. There has been a long gone number game that is been happening not only in terms of mapping, open mapping of things like that. Also, even as it was mentioned that what might change the overall humanitarian support system in the process. So even in humanitarian IR, information management, there are big number game that is been happening. This is why data manipulation is happening in the same process. Even in the you can see that data politics is being there. So all these things can be resolved if the community itself or the individuals who are engaged in the ground level, they are being not empowered, supported to scale up their capacity. If those capacities are not being upscaled, you are having project managers, you are having planning things going on somewhere out there. Even community doesn't know what's happening. They're just collecting those data, giving it to you. You're doing whatever you want to do. That's not the way empowering should work. So this is where we from our community trying to reverse back the game, actually trying the bottom up process of projects, and even what we have tried out, as I was mentioning about BOIL, Bangladesh Open Innovation Lab. One thing to be clear, BOIL is derived from OpenStreetMap community over there, but BOIL does not work with OSM, supports OSM. So it supports the ecosystem out there. They are somehow, the plan we are having is nurturing the potential guys over there who have the capacity. We are bringing them in. We are making connectivity and make it sure that they are connected to the specific projects where they can have that as I said, career pathways. So when they are doing that, here comes the project managers in the process. If you are giving them a project of data collection, only data collection and planning a project is a different thing, different ballgame. It's not like that it will be happening by anyone. Project managers need some specific skill sets. So those skill sets need to be nurtured out there. Yeah. Thank you.
So we spent like 20 minutes on the first question. It was very interesting, so I hope not too many of you have questions. Maybe try to be a little bit shorter. You had one? Okay.
Thank you. I will be quick, but if you need just a quick sharing before my question. I work here in the donors, and we made a project in Ouagadougou, in Burkina Faso, where, for example, some area in the city were not in the cadastral plan of the city, and we financed some local communities to map their own habitants and quarter to be eligible to the electrification plan and adduction of water, etc. So it was we had an agreement with the government where if the quarter was mapped on OpenStreetMap, they were eligible to the next plan for electrification, etc. So it was, I think, a good and a great example of how OpenStreetMap can work with public and public government. For my question was about the flag and the maybe more for Mr. Baki Bila, but all input are welcome, of course. How the flag of each data we can put on OpenStreetMap, which kind of we can put the an information in OpenStreetMap, like it's a school, it's a road, it's a health facilities, etc. And we can download each kind of data of OpenStreetMap. Can you maybe share with us some advice or tools, or we have to flag this kind of data in OpenStreetMap? We can't just map, okay, there is an habitation, there is a road, but I think that there is some other information we can put on OpenStreetMap. How this more specific information can be also a part of more global information and can be more useful for all the providers. I don't know if it's clear, but
if I'm getting it right, you're asking that if you want to put more data other than the geospatial data itself, yes, like development data or any service specific data, yeah, it is possible. Martin can emphasize on that one too. It is possible.
I don't think it's a good place to enter into a debate of specifically what goes into OpenStreetMap, because it's a debate actually, because it's a participatory project. But yeah, it's a good question that sometimes, like, I think OpenStreetMap has managed, and you notice we talked about it a lot during this panel. It was not directed at it, like a little bit because of the people we invited, of course, but like I didn't ask questions around OpenStreetMap, but I think it's a success story of data sharing on the geospatial world, because I think partly because it's simpler to share geospatial data, because it's like objective in a way. A school is a school, a street is a street. For other stuff, you have different platforms. We can always quote the Humanitarian Data Exchange platform, for instance, maintained by OCHA as the UN. But like, I don't think it has reached the same level of like maturity and wide use as OpenStreetMap. So it's always the discussion around open data at some point. Like if you don't have standards and if you don't have a standardized place to put the data, it's open, but it's not usable by everybody. So I'm not sure if I answer your question.
Quite.
Even data sensitivity also comes into play.
Yeah.
In some cases.
Yeah, you are exactly, like then you will have questions if you have data about beneficiaries, etc. But it's also something. It can be actually a question for this panel. Is that and Emmanuel, you touched it a little bit in your presentation. It's something I wanted to ask you. How to handle, like, when we are not talking about open data, but data sharing between organizations, because some data cannot be public, about people, but still you have different, like, humanitarian organizations working around the same population of, like, beneficiaries, and sometimes we will come and ask them like 3 times, 5 times the same question about their demographics, etc., because one NGO is running a program on health, the other one on, like, on education, but you still ask always the same base question. And in some countries, well, it's also, one could say it's also controversial, but in some countries, like in France, for instance, where like the administration are talking to each other, so they still ask you a lot of questions, but normally they try to not ask always the same question. And is this something we could push between NGOs, which are not like part of the same organization in a way. It's not like different government branches. So what do you think about this?
Yeah. So I know this is a very big, question in terms of data sharing, especially when it's actually, external, at least from organization to organization. So, but there are some critical things that we could actually put in place to actually help or foster the possibility of that actually happening. And the first thing, right, is we all collect data, right, and for different purposes or similar purposes. So, but the issue of consent, right, comes to play over and over again, right? So, and I think it's at the point of, getting beneficiary data that we need to start thinking about consent, not just for our use, but at the same time also eliciting consent for data sharing, right? And that way we would have actually done something legally responsible, right, for organizations, in quote, to be able to share data, right, especially if it's for a very, very good reason. Now that's just one bit. Number two, in sharing, you need to also elicit the need, analysis need. If perhaps we are just sharing for some analyses that are not basically specific, right, to individuals, then we don't need to share things that are actually quite sensitive in terms of personally identifiable information like names, right, phone numbers and what have you, right? We could anonymize the data set, right, using maybe some form of cryptic beneficiary IDs, right? And then we can actually integrate, and then we are still able to actually achieve the same thing. So, but in the midst of all this, if data sharing is perhaps the main aim, and we are seeing the benefit of this, like I said earlier on, right, and we actually have consent, right, for it, okay, it's about sitting down like we are currently doing, right, for with other partners within the North-West Syria, right, at the moment, right, to commit to the same standard, right, in terms of data protection, right, in terms of talking about it, in terms of, okay, this is the infrastructure, right, that is actually going to work, right, in terms of ensuring that we have some level of data security, and then we don't actually have a breach that will actually put our beneficiaries into some form of funny, situations. So, at the end of the day, we are saying collaboration. Collaboration involves discussions, right, at different levels, including technical ones, right, in terms of this is what we consider as the bare minimum, right, in terms of data protection, data security, right, and we all commit to that, right, and that way, if data is actually being shared freely from one organization to the other, we can actually say, yes, we are not actually putting our beneficiaries at risk.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
So I just wanted to add a few thoughts on what you were saying. The first one was about the standardization of data protection policy, but also about the accountability behind the data protection policy, because even the strongest policy and systems can be hacked. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. So starting to share personal identifiable information could be very, very dangerous, especially for population already at risk and vulnerable. The second thing that I was thinking was even through anonymization of data. That's not the only step that needs to be ensured in sharing the data, but as well to ensure that there are processes in place that the people who will be using the data know how to analyze them. So like the sample size, the statistical relevance of that data, because otherwise, like just using the data how it is could actually bring very different answers to different organizations if it's not well ponderated or whatnot. and that could actually provoke more problems than solutions. Those were just my two pieces of mind.
We have a question here.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. Manuel appears my name, and yeah, work for goal. Something about data protection that I just wanted to, I might ask this to Emmanuel, and the other one is on maybe I'll be asking to share money, if I've mentioned your name well. Work situations whereby, yes, it's standardizing it's ideal. Just thinking on what if you standardized, and let's say donors, let's say funding partners want specific information, and if you have the standard that you're not going to maybe share this particular kind of data, they're thinking, how do we let's understand the situation? Then maybe to share another interesting project you did in the RC, and what kept ringing in my head is what kind of maybe environmental softwares we're using to do the missing maps, yeah. And how was the data? How did you use the data after? I mean, was it basically for the project, or was it help to fix some of the areas that probably you had? There was issues of missing maps and things like that.
I will give you the mic. Just maybe try to be quick on the tech aspects, and you both can discuss in bilateral.
So we're actually going to be, so that was a year ago, so in monitoring if the data is still being used, this is something that we have in plan to monitor now, but as part of a missing map, all the data was validated at different layers of the government, so the CDCs, the health, the community health levels, etc., were all validating the data, and it's all shared on the different platforms such as OSM, but also HDX, and being used at the moment. At least we know it's downloaded at the moment on HDX by different NGOs. And yeah, welcome to have a chat with you later on.
Yeah. So to have response to that, I'll just reiterate what I said. You have input organizational data sharing policies, and then you also have consent, right? At the point of actually collecting your data. So it's a tricky one. If the donor didn't have this discussion with an organization, which I'll be surprised, right? Because I should think some things are usually clearly spelled out right from the start in terms of are we going to be accessing beneficiary data or not, right? So it comes back to that. I mean, if data has been collected and consent for data sharing has not been basically agreed to by the beneficiaries, then I think it's ethically wrong to say you want to now even share with the donor, right, at that particular point in time. So, and that's why I think it's important to actually have these discussions right at the start, have these conversations as to what extent, right, can we actually, because they still own the data, and I know GDPR is very, very strong on this, right, in terms of how we actually go about, handling people's data. So we need to have that conversation, I would say, from the start and from the middle, but if we're having that conversation at the midpoint and then we are faced with issues of maybe going back to get consent, right, from the beneficiaries, then it's a no-no for me to say you want to actually go ahead and start sharing the data, because you'll be actually breaching individuals' personal rights. Yeah.
So we can take one more question, but really quick if someone has really a pressing question. If not, we can go to break because it's time. Okay, just one question now. Quickly, if you can.
Thank you to all of you for your presentation. Just a quick question. So we are talking about data protection, and at the same time we're talking about open street map, so open data. And I was just thinking about when we were talking about empowering the local community. So of course you have people collecting the data on the field from the community, but how you can do to be sure community is having access to the data, so to OpenStreetMap, for example, and it's not only used by government or company that already know how to use mapping, but local community sometimes don't even know how to read it.
It's a great question. I'm afraid we won't have a coffee break. I don't know if someone wants to try a quick response.
Sorry for that.
Very quick one. It's more like if you can empower the community itself and give them the ownership of this data, they do know how to interpret those data. But if you are running a project, community doesn't know what's happening with those data and whatsoever those data means. This is the main thing that's happening. So you have to somehow make sure community is deciding, or the people deciding which data should be there. So which data they need over there. So it should not be just based on project needs, but also community needs.
So let me perhaps, since we are almost wrapping up, right, just say a little story, right, and then I would actually link it up to what we're actually talking about right now. Right. So a mentor of mine once told me about an implementation somewhere in Africa, right, and they went into the community. They actually got this genetically modified seed for tomatoes, right? And they saw a very, very large expanse of riverbank. And they went ahead, started planting, right, the tomatoes. They got there, they checked the soil, they did everything. It's fine, so we can plant. Oh, how come these people are not planting anything here, right? And then no community engagement as such. They had brought someone who is kind of a local, not a local, maybe from the capital city, who is actually advising, right? And they planted. And it was about maybe a week to their plant harvest period, right? And they come out one morning and they noticed like they've had hippopotamus, right? Hippos had actually, gone through all the field and destroyed, all the plantation. And then they turned to the community people to say, hey, why didn't you tell us hippos come here? And they said, we thought you guys actually had security systems or whatever in place to actually cater for that. You didn't ask us any question, right? So to come back to what we're talking about, right, in terms of community and then actually uptaking data, there's need for community engagement, right? And it's not just in theory, right? You need persons to actually go there, right? Identify champions, right? Persons who can actually talk more to persons about what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're trying to serve a community, I would actually think it's important, right, to engage them, right? Let them actually know the purpose, right, of your program, what you're trying to do, and that way they can actually chip in and tell you, oh, this is actually helpful, this is not actually helpful, and then you can actually, move on from there. So the same thing actually applies. If I don't see a need for it, I wouldn't be asking for your data to start with, but if I see like how I actually fit into the puzzle, right, into the bigger picture, then definitely I would be asking some questions from time to time to see how are we doing, how are we actually, getting better as a result of this intervention. So I would actually, shut up of time right there.
I think this was a great final note.
Perfect. Thanks a lot to you all. Just a quick word of conclusion from me. I think what's interesting is for a long time, I think some actors from the humanitarian and development sectors thought that we were an exceptional sector, that the same rules don't apply to it, etc. And we see more and more that obviously it's not the case. And when you're discussing, basically we're discussing participation currently, participation of communities, of population, and whether you're doing it anywhere in the world, it's the same challenges. It's how do you make sure that there is accountability and what people express is taken into account in the final decision. and data is just a part of it. And we also see that when you're talking about, like, when we define the theme for this year's GeONG, we're like, okay, our theme doesn't make really sense anymore because we are trying to encompass too many things in it. But when you start this conversation, we start with collaboration and we end up discussing responsible data use. Like, we didn't talk too much about responsible, like, environmental aspect, but it will come out in other aspects, and like everything is interlinked. And so I think the challenge is to manage this complexity while trying to remain operational to convince the people that what we're doing is useful. But we had some great examples today, so I'm confident that we will continue progressing together. What can I conclude? You can go take your coffee now if you want.